So Trump gave this really quite bizarre and unhinged press conference, and if you think that's a little harsh, this video is going to be interspersed with this report from Fox News, one of those news organizations that President Trump deems to be on his side.
It just, I pick a headline from today. I can't even pick a place to start.
I mean, let's just scratch the surface on this one.
I'm here today to update the American people on the incredible progress that has been made in the last 4 weeks since my inauguration. We have made incredible progress.
Yep, this is going to be how you manage to get the shortest serving national security advisor in history, isn't it?
I don't think there's ever been a president elected who in this short period of time has done what we've done.
So let's take a look at Trump's press conference. And I want to stress that all the repetition here is his own.
Is such hatred. The tone, Jim, if you look, the hatred, that is a constant hit. The panel is almost exclusive anti-Trump, always exclusive anti-Trump. The good news is he doesn't have good ratings. And the hatred and venom coming from his mouth, the hatred coming from, it's story after story after story is bad. I won. Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people. But tomorrow the headlines are going to be Donald Trump rants and raves. I'm not ranting and raving. Go ahead. I'm not ranting and raving. I love this. I'm having a good time doing it.
Yeah, when you have to say, I'm not ranting and raving 3 times, you might be ranting and raving.
It's crazy what we're watching every day. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. He keeps repeating ridiculous throwaway lines that are not true at all.
I think the media is the opposition party in many ways. This morning, because many of our nation's reporters and folks will not tell you the truth and will not treat the wonderful people of our country with the respect that they deserve.
When he's caught out with a falsehood, once again repeating that he had the highest electoral count,
which he didn't
since Ronald Reagan, and the reporter calls him out on it, and he's called out again on it. He says, "Well, those are numbers that somebody gave me."
Because people came out and voted like they've never seen before. I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan.
Electoral votes. In fact, President Obama got 365 in 2006.
Well, I'm talking about Republican.
The President Obama 332, yeah. And George H.W. Bush 426 when he won as president.
Yep, that would be the dishonest media burning you with the facts.
So why should Americans trust you?
Well, no, I was given that information. I was just given. We had a very, very big margin.
I guess my question is, why should Americans trust you when you accuse the information they receive of being fake when you're providing information that's
well, I was given that information. The press has become so dishonest that if we don't talk about it, we are doing a tremendous disservice to the American people. Tremendous disservice. We have to talk about it to find out what's going on, because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out.
And when he won't answer a question as simple as, the Russians are interfering in our election, this is a demonstrable true thing, your people were on the phone with the Russians, did you talk about the interference at all? And we can't get a straight answer on that. That's bothersome.
President Trump, since you brought up Russia, I'm looking for some clarification here. During your campaign, did anyone from your team communicate with members of the Russian government or Russian intelligence? And if so, what were the nature of those conversations?
Yeah. Well, the failing New York Times wrote a big, long front-page story yesterday.
The failing New York Times. Well, let's just take a look on the internet and see if we can see how badly the New York Times is failing. Yeah, I think we might be able to put this into the same category as Trump's "I had the biggest election win since Reagan" category. You know, the alternative facts.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
The dishonesty, the total deceit and deception makes them certainly partially the opposition party, absolutely. I'm really not a bad person, by the way. No, but the tone is such, I do get good ratings, you have to admit that. The tone is such hatred.
No, Trump, you don't have good ratings. In fact, you have the worst ratings. Now, you might get good ratings as a TV personality, but as a president, you're finishing absolutely last. Bottom of the pile. Total loser. I mean, it's almost like that you were the president who, whilst actually managing to win the Electoral College, had the biggest loss of the popular vote in history, almost 4 times larger than the next person who managed to win the election but lose the popular vote. And man, is Trump in just complete denial about this. I mean, most people, when they win the Electoral College but lose the popular vote, they accept it and get on with it. Not Trump. He is obsessed that he must have won the popular vote as well. But even if he had, it wouldn't have made that much difference, because it's what, like 46 to 48 or something. And even now, when he's at record level unpopularity, so early into his presidency, he's still in denial about this, claiming that, he's going to have investigations into this which will cost millions of dollars. And we all know they're going to show that there is no significant voter fraud, all purely for Trump's ego, because he was too thin-skinned to actually just accept the fact that he lost the popular vote. And of course, while we're on Trump blowing public money like candy, he spent as much on travel in 1 month as Obama did in an entire year. But Trump is almost surreally thin-skinned about having to be the most popular. I mean, you remember that thing about the inaugural crowd sizes?
Choosing to send the press secretary out into the briefing room, summoning reporters to talk about the inaugural crowd size. Does that send a message to the American people that that's more important than some of the very pressing issues?
Part of my whole victory, part of that is when they try and demean me unfairly, because we had a massive crowd of people. We had a crowd. I looked over that sea of people. When I looked at the numbers that happened to come in from all of the various sources, we had the biggest audience in the history of inaugural speeches.
Yes, of course, Trump. And you had the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan, and the New York Times is failing. So this claim that he had the biggest inaugural crowd size in history, which is just factually wrong. I mean, I took a look at the pictures myself, and my estimates were, if he was lucky, he had a quarter of Obama's crowd size. And of course, he had all the Trump supporters saying, oh, no, it's all just different camera angles and the such like. Actually, no, there's a time lapse of when the crowd size peaked, and this is it. You barely get up to this little kink in the road with the crowd size, where Obama's crowd size went all the way down to the Washington Monument. In fact, there's pictures from the air showing vast crowds around the Washington Monument during Obama's inauguration. And his obsession with crowd sizes is still going. So for the weekend, he decided he was going to go down to Florida, where he was going to have a campaign rally.
A lot going on with President Trump today. He's going to Florida to spend his 3rd straight weekend there. Now, his plans include a rally on Saturday that is officially a 2020 re-election campaign event.
About 4 weeks into his new administration, where of course he boasted again about his massive crowd size.
The media will give him no credit. The media, as I told you, they won't show this crowd. Look at that, all the way outside of this. This is as big a hangar as you get. All the way outside, way back to the fences. Amazing. I want to thank you.
So there's Trump in the middle, and we pan out to see the crowd size, like the media never does because they're so dishonest. And my guess is about 2,000 people, if you're lucky. Maybe. And that's the same sort of crowd estimate I did for the Reason rally, where it does look packed. Sure, it doesn't quite cut the mustard when you're comparing it to a 30,000-seater stadium, but whatever. Let's do the same thing again. Let's colour in areas of about 10 people, meaning that the total of all the coloured areas is about 100 people. Which again puts the estimate that there's maybe 1,000 people down each side of the reflecting pool as being pretty bloody generous. Maybe, just maybe, Cara, you ought to amend this from tens of thousands to, I don't know, maybe something a little more like this.
There's nothing wrong with it. There are are dozens of us. Dozens!
I know, you give me a crowd estimate size on this. I mean, my reckoning is a couple of thousand-ish. Trump's estimate, 15,000, with an additional 12,000 who couldn't get in. So let's just compare that crowd size, which he thinks is 15,000, to a 30,000-seater stadium. Yeah, I think you might be being a little bit on the optimistic side with your crowd estimates there, Donald. And that's using the best wide-angle shot that you could get to make the crowd size seem bigger than it was. Look, let's do a little estimation with Trump's exact photo. That box there contains about 30 people. That's what I counted. So that means that this many boxes contains about 300 people, which means that maybe there are 7 times that many people in the crowd, which is about 2,000. Or looked at another way, that plane in the background there holds about 300 people, and the crowd size in the foreground is maybe enough to fill 7 or so of those planes. Or put another way, if the president wants me to believe that there is a crowd size greater than 10,000 people there, maybe he should post a picture where there's more than, let's say for instance, at least 2,000 people. And what, pray tell, did the president want to discuss at this first campaign rally of his 2020 re-election bid, only 4 weeks into his presidency? Why, terrorism. Of course. Now, you may recall that previously the president had accused the media of not covering terrorism.
All over Europe, it's happening. It's gotten to a point where it's not even being reported. And in many cases, the very, very dishonest press doesn't want to report it.
Okay. The president is accusing the media of refusing to cover major terrorist attacks. It makes perfect sense. You know the old news adage, if it bleeds, don't talk about it. But in one case, the president is right. In one case, there was a terror attack the press did not talk about. It's something called the Bowling Green Massacre.
2 Iraqis came here to this country, were radicalized, and they were the masterminds behind the Bowling Green Massacre. Most people don't know that because it didn't get covered.
Yes, it didn't get covered on the flimsy excuse that there was no Bowling Green Massacre.
Now Trump, not wanting to leave his spokeswoman high and dry, decided that he needed to also create a terrorist attack that the media just didn't cover. And he did it in his first campaign rally for the 2020 election.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden.
Yes, Sweden. Who can believe Sweden? What happened in Sweden last night? Where absolutely nothing happened. And for some reason, the dishonest media just isn't covering this. That's unless, of course, you're one of the thousands of Trump supporters who think that this video here shows that Sweden is like a war zone, rather than that was people setting off fireworks in the street at New Year. But for the feelings over Facts Brigade, it probably won't make any difference. They could as well posted a picture of downtown Beirut or something. I mean, these are the sorts of folks who fell hook, line and sinker for this headline that Hillary's stated position of wanting a no-fly zone in Syria would mean war with Russia, and therefore, if Hillary had been elected, we'd be at war with Russia right now. And it's all based off this one soundbite with this general.
What do you think of that option, sir?
Right now, Senator, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war against Syria and Russia. That's a pretty fundamental decision that certainly I'm not going to make.
That's until you actually watch the whole video.
But Secretary Kerry's trying to get a stand down of the Syrian and Russian Air Force, and if he's successful, that would be a good thing.
Joint Force has a responsibility to make sure the president has a full range of options. We have discussed that issue in the past under certain conditions.
What about the option of controlling the airspace so that barrel bombs cannot be dropped? What do you think of that option, sir?
Right now, Senator, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war against Syria and Russia. base.
No, what he asked was, should we have a no-fly zone so we can protect these people from being slaughtered? That's what he's talking about.
I answered that first.
That's what we're all talking about.
So that would not require going to war full scale, would it?
Not necessarily, Senator.
But these hardcore supporters, none of this will matter, because even if you can debunk all of their hardcore arguments, they'll just move the goalposts somewhere else.
Unfortunately, much of the media in Washington, D.C., along with New York, Los Angeles in particular, speaks not for the people, but for the special interests and for those profiting off a very, very obviously broken system.
Yeah, really standing up for the people there, dude. I mean, if your cabinet is full of people who have got exceptionally rich off this same corrupt system, I'm not so sure that's a card I would lead with. This isn't so much draining the swamp as filling your cabinet with it.
By the press, I said to him yesterday, this whole Russia scam that you guys are building so that you don't talk about the real subject, which is illegal leaks.
Cool. So the whole Russian thing was just a scam. I mean, it's not like you would ask anyone to resign over it or anything.
Mr. President, did you fire Mike Flynn?
Mike Flynn is a fine person, and I asked for his resignation. He respectfully gave it.
He's saying that the information in the leaks is accurate. After all, it's the reason he fired Mike Flynn, right?
Well, I guess one of the reasons I'm here today is to tell you the whole Russian thing, that's a ruse. That's a ruse.
When Russia was hacking into the election, hacking into the Democrats, the DNC, your guys were on the phone with the Russians. Did you talk about that? We don't get a straight answer on this question, which leads us to continue to ask the question.
The same thing happened with respect to General Flynn. Everybody saw this. And I'm saying, the first thing I thought of when I heard about it is, how does the press get this information that's classified? Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press. You know why? Because it's an illegal process, and the press should be ashamed of themselves. But more importantly, the people that gave out the information to the press should be ashamed of themselves. Really ashamed. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. So I don't want classified information getting out to the public. Same thing with Australia. I said, that's terrible that it was leaked, but it wasn't that important. But then I said to myself, what happens when I'm dealing with the problem of North Korea?
Well, interesting you should mention North Korea there, because it turns out that when North Korea did have a new missile test, Trump decided to have that briefing in an open dining room in full view of the other diners, who were happily sitting there taking pictures and putting them on social media like Facebook. And of course, because it's Trump's club, of course, why wouldn't he let people take pictures of the guy who carries around the nuclear football and put them on social media? Because, you've got to take national security seriously. I mean, you would never go around comparing your own Secret Service to, say, Nazi Germany.
I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. And I say that. And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public.
But coming back to Flynn, the guy you fired.
He didn't have to do that because what he did wasn't wrong. What he did in terms of the information.
Actually, no. What he did was wrong. It violated the Logan Act. And then he tried to cover it up by not telling the FBI about it. Also a federal offense.
Saw what was wrong was the way that other people, including yourselves in this room, were given that information. Because that was classified information. It was given illegally. That's the real problem.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that the press exposing corruption in the government is pretty much what the press is meant to do.
But it's up to people like you and all the rest of us to point it out when the President of the United States keeps saying things that are demonstrably, unquestionably, opinion aside, 100% false.
And to call out people in positions of power, including the most powerful person in the world, which president, when he says things that are untrue.
It's meant to highlight when the government thinks that it is above the law. You know, you can't just sort of say when the president does it, that means that it's illegal.
That the powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned.
The president is not above the law. Even if he says it's classified information, that doesn't make his actions legal. And then it's almost surreal to blame the press for finding out about that corruption in the government.
Your opposition was hacked, and the Russians were responsible for it, and your people were on the phone with Russia on the same day it was happening, and we're fools for asking the questions? No, sir.
But sure, if you want to go with national security, Flynn seemed to have fairly clear views on what counted as a breach of national security.
I have called on Hillary Clinton to drop out of the race because she put our nation's security at extremely high risk with her careless use of a private email server.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Lock her up, lock her up. You guys are good.
You too, Flynn, especially seeing as lying to the FBI is a federal offense.
If I, a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today.
Yeah, great words of advice there coming from the guy who had the shortest tenure as the National Security Advisor in history.
Crooked Hillary Clinton, leave this race now.
Whereas, of course, President Trump, who called on a foreign power to hack important classified information from a political opponent, he's fine.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
I mean, those who remember the election campaign may remember that Trump was quite clear that if he got elected as president, he would appoint a special prosecutor. That's how certain he was that Hillary had broken the law.
Collusion and corruption of the highest order, and is one more reason why I ask my Attorney General, I will ask, to appoint a special prosecutor.
Which, of course, got the adulation of the crowd and was one of the first promises that was forgotten when he actually got elected.
One promise after another, after years of politicians lying to you to get elected. They lied to the American people in order to get elected.
Yes, the election promises. Like how you knew much better than all of the generals and you could solve the problem of ISIS, which for some reason Obama just didn't want to solve.
Now Secretary Mattis, he's over there now working very hard to submit a plan for the defeat of ISIS.
They said, Mr. Trump, we really think it's appropriate. And I did too, because I was getting killed in the press saying I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
Do you still feel like you know more about ISIS than the generals?
Well, they don't know much because they're not winning. That I can tell you. Now, I think they're not winning for a different reason. I think Obama's hurting them. It's all being run from the White House. I've spoken to certain generals. I'll keep it quiet as to who, but highly respected people. They say we could knock them out fast.
In office now generals or retired generals?
And they said, both of them said the same thing. If we had the leadership, meaning the go-ahead, you could knock them out fast. For some reason, Obama's not doing that.
One promise after another, after years of politicians lying to you to get elected. They lied to the American people in order to get elected.
Yes, whilst, of course, under the leadership of Trump, we can expect swift victories against ISIS. Apart from his first military adventure.
My understanding of the parameters of the raid were that they wanted to capture individuals. And obviously they didn't want to kill children or women. When you lose a $75 million airplane, and more importantly, American lives are life is lost and wounded, I don't believe that you can call it a success.
Yep, that's the Republican John McCain, who served as a fighter pilot for his country, whilst Donald Trump got 5 deferments for serving his country, including 1 for bone spurs.
Trump, starting his real estate career, got a medical deferment because of a bone spur in his foot.
Numerous deferments because of college, and I had a foot thing, and I had deferment for that.
Despite the fact Trump had been active in various sports, including basketball and baseball.
So, Trump, when are you going to show us that you know better than the generals?
This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine. And the other thing, chaos. There's zero chaos. We are running, this is a fine-tuned machine.
Yes, a finely run machine. One which President Reagan thought was exceptional. One which he described as that shining beacon on the hill. And one you seem to be keen to drag down and hold on a moral par with Russia.
Putin's a killer. A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent? Do you think our country's so innocent?
Yep, he wants to morally compare America to the standard of Russia, a system where political opponents and the press can actually be killed or imprisoned simply for criticizing the government.
I don't know of any government leaders that are killers in America.
I will tell you, I have spoken to others in intelligence, and they are big believers in, as an example, waterboarding.
It's annoying to me now to read every time it's discussed in the press or in Congress that it simulates the feeling of drowning. It doesn't simulate the feeling of drowning. You are being drowned slowly.
You did tell me.
Because they say it does work. It does work.
Mr. President,
now, personally,
Mr. President, you told me during one of the debates that you would bring back waterboarding and a hell of a lot worse.
I would do what I would do. I want to keep our country safe.
I mean, Jesus, the reason we don't torture people is twofold. Firstly, and most importantly, it doesn't work. It's not an effective way of getting reliable information, because people under torture will tell you whatever they think you want to hear to make the torture stop. Secondly, it's inhumane. I mean, John McCain here, he was actually captured and tortured by the Vietnamese. And would you believe it? He's actually got pretty strong opinions about this. And then lastly, of course, if you're going to say, yeah, we're going to torture people, what moral grounds do you have for asking enemy forces not to torture your soldiers if they're captured? By this action, you lose the right to protest when American soldiers are tortured. Look, you've just got to accept at this point that the president is not a smart man. He doesn't have a detailed knowledge of any of this, which is why when he's asked questions about, general policy, strategy, how do you intend to broadly achieve these goals, not the details of the timetable, just generally how you intend to achieve goals, he gives complete non-answers. He dodges the question.
I don't want to be one of these guys that say, yes, here's what we're going to do. I don't have to do that. I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do in North Korea. Wait a minute. I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do in North Korea.
Dude, it's called having a foreign policy. It's actually quite common for countries to have a foreign policy.
And I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do with Iran. You know why? Because they shouldn't know. And eventually you guys are going to get tired of asking that question.
And that's why the president is at his best on the campaign trail, reading stuff off his auto cue about America is bad and it needs good things to happen to it, and he knows terrific people who will make it happen. There is no detail to any of this. You have a game show host for a president. 2017 was the year that a reality game show and the presidency became indistinguishable. And I tried my best before the election to highlight that. Unsuccessfully, it must be said. Seems like people were more concerned about whether there were social justice warriors there or not, rather than whether you were electing an idiot for a president. An irony, seeing as he wants to repeal the Johnson Act, which will be marvellous for Anita Sarkeesian. And naturally, this video is going to get slaughtered in the ratings, just like all the others. But why? I mean, really, do you not pay attention to what the president is saying? So yeah, if you actually liked what you heard here, like the fact that someone actually waded through and watched all of these Trump speeches and did things like fact check his crowd sizes. And let me just say, it's incredibly frustrating going through all of this, because whilst I'm used to going through pseudoscience or creationists or feminists or whatever, and showing how they're talking crap, this is the President of the United States here. Oh, and yeah, if you're one of the folks who actually has got this far and is now saying, I'm going to unsubscribe because you're such a cuck or something, people like you threatening to unsubscribe is like cancer threatening to leave a patient. I think I'll get over it.